the previous videos, we talked about 3 domains for the educational objectives. The cognitive is related to the knowledge. The psychomotor is related to the skill. And the affective is related to the attitudes and values. In these videos, we're going to look into the Bloom's taxonomy for the cognitive domain. In fact, there are 2 versions of Bloom's taxonomy. The original version is in 1956, and then the taxonomy is being revised in 2001. The 2 versions here are similar, not much different, except for level 5 and level 6. Both versions of Bloom's taxonomy has 6 levels. In the revised versions, they revise the terminology and swap between the 5 and 6, making the evaluations to be level 5 and synthesis to the level 6. Now let us first look at the original version. Level 1 is knowledge. Level 2, it would be comprehensions. Level 3, applications. Level 4, analysis. Level 5, synthesis. And level 6, evaluations. As for the revised versions, level 1 is remember. Level 2, understand. Level 3, apply. Level 4, analyze. Level 5, evaluations. And level 6, creates. Now for the following discussions, we will focus on the revised versions of the taxonomy. Now every single terminology here carries some meanings, which can be seen from these slides. This is about the cognitive domain. We have 6 levels here. Level 1 will be the most basic, and level 6 it will be the most advanced level. In terms of the complexity, level 6 will be the most complex one. To make it easy to understand, this taxonomy here is a tool used by the academicians to determine different levels of knowledge, and this can be separated into 6 levels. The easiest one, it will be remembering something. This involves recall and remember facts without necessarily understanding them. As long as the students can recall the things that you teach in the class, it is considered achieving the level 1s of the cognitive domain. Now slightly higher than remembering, the students need to understand and interpret the learned information. Now not just has the ability to remember, the students will have to demonstrate the ability to understand the information. Higher up, it will be applying. This is when students can use methods, concepts, principles, and theories learned in new situations. Not just remembering and understanding. Students must be able to apply or adopt the thing that they learn under different situations. Next, it will be analyzing. This is when the students is able to identify how parts related to one another or to a larger structures or purpose. The students should be able to look into the matter, study the situations, identify their parts and their relationship with the others, and so on so far. This will require the students to have in-depth understanding in terms of the case and situations. Higher up in level 5, there will be evaluations. Now students are required to judge the value of something based on criteria, processes or standards. Now, if you see the differences between analyzing and evaluating, analyzing is more towards diagnosing something. It can be a situation, a case, a structure, a problem, and so on and so forth. Now, once you have completed analyzing, knowing the case and the situations, then you can make some judgment for the evaluations. Normally, it comes after analyzing. Knowing the conditions of something is one thing, and how the findings from the analysis shall govern the following decisions. This will be the methods of evaluations. And normally when we talk about the evaluations, this shall be carried out objectively and systematically. It should be based on good justifications and brings to reasonable conclusions. That's why we are talking about the judgment based on some criteria, processes or standards. Now, the highest level in terms of the knowledge, it will be creative. This is when you generate a coherent functional whole, recognize new patterns. To make it simple, creating here means developing something new. Not only that, it needs to be functional and meeting the purpose of creating. As far as you need to know at this moment here, is that the taxonomy for the cognitive domain, there are 6 levels here. Different levels represent different thinking order that the students need to go through during the course of learning. The lower the level, the more basic it is. As the higher the level, the more advanced and more complex the knowledge will be required from the students. Now let us proceed with the instructions given to the students in order to make known to the students and stimulate the relevant thinking orders related to the cognitive domain. Knowing there are 3 types of domain here, different domain will have different levels on their own. To help us distinguish those levels under different domain, we use C1 to C6 to represent the 6th level under the cognitive domain. C1 is about knowledge, C2 comprehensions, C3 applications, C4 analysis, C5 evaluations, and C6 creating. You know that C1 is related to remembering the knowledge. Now, if you want the students to remember something, when you are giving instructions to the students, you may use these terminologies here. You ask them to define something, you ask them to identify something, you ask them to label, to list, to name, recall, and also state. All this will only require students to recall without even fully understanding it. Now, when come to the level 2, we are looking into the comprehensions. The students need to demonstrate understanding while answering their questions. You can ask them to describe, to discuss, to explain, to locate, to paraphrase, to give example, and also to translate. This can only be done with certain levels of understanding. Now, when come to C3, which is related to the applications, this will be slightly higher levels of understanding as compared to simply comprehensions, which is the lowest level of understanding. You may comprehend something, but may not be able to apply under different situations if you do not fully understand the fundamentals. In order for the students to be able to do the applications, that means they should be able to identify the governing factors behind those things, understand the concept, theories, and principles at the fundamentals level, so that even the situation change, but still within the governing factors, the relevant knowledge learned can be applied. Now, to encourage the students to apply certain knowledge, you may instruct them to apply, to carry out, to demonstrate, to illustrate, to prepare, to solve, and to use something. Next, we look at C4, which is related to the analysis. Now, from C1 to C3, they are considered lower thinking order. The reason it is classified under the lower thinking order, it is that the levels of understanding is still quite general across the board. It is only when come to the analysis, it becomes more focused, more discrete, and specifically referring to a certain case. This shall involve in-depth understanding of a designated situations or case, which is unique to the others, and the mechanism it will be case-to-case basis. Now, the terminology used during the instructions, this shall include analyze, categorize, compare, contrast, differentiate, discriminates, and outline. Next, it will be the evaluations. Starting from level 5, there will be inputs from the students themselves. This will involve judgments, and there will be opinions given by the students. The relevant terminology include assess, conclude, evaluate, interpret, justify, select, and support. And these evaluations normally come after you've done the analysis. There will be some decisions out of the outcome of the analysis. Now, the highest level, which is C6, is creating. You are actually asking the students to formulate new structures from the existing knowledge and skills. Now, this involves developing something new out of the existing knowledge and skills. This will include combine, construct, design, develop, generate, plan, and propose. Talking about the terminology, which is reflective to different levels of cognitive domain, there are some common misconceptions among the lecturers, and although this has been quite clearly outlined here, there are still some lecturers having difficulty to differentiate different levels of cognitive domain. The first issue it will be, many consider this as the keywords when they are doing the assessment. It is as if you apply the relevant keywords here. The relevant questions in your test, your assignment, or your final exam is assumed to be automatically reflected to that levels of cognitive domain. This is not true actually, because we are not talking about the keywords. These keywords can easily be manipulated, and at the end of the day, it may not really reflect the actual level of the knowledge that students demonstrate to you, gain from their learning. Now, the first point here is, please do not take this as the keywords when you are giving instructions to the students, assuming these keywords will automatically reflect it to the levels of thinking orders. Sometimes this is not true. The second problem with this it will be the use of the terminology in the instructions. If you search around the internet, there is a variety of the terms suggested under different levels of cognitive domain, much more than what is being displayed here. Some may not fully reflect the relevant cognitive level. That is one problem. Another one, some may have the terminology overlapping among different levels of cognitive. Sometimes you see the word discuss in level 2, and then sometimes you see discuss in level 3. Sometimes they even put discuss under level 4. Now the question here is, where should this discuss be belongs to? Shall it be level 2? Shall it be level 3? Or shall it be level 4? Or discuss can actually be throughout. This leads to confusions. In order to resolve this problem, I will recommend you that follow strictly the terminologies here. You will observe there is no overlapping in terms of the usage of the terminologies, and only selective type of terms are being used, which we could say that is more confidently reflective to that particular levels of cognitive domain. Now the point just now here, as if contradict to our first point, not to treat this as the keywords to be used in your instruction. However, in our second point here, I encourage you to follow strictly the usage of the terminology under different category here. Now what is the problem here? It is not about the keyword. It is about the nature of that particular task required from the students to demonstrate their levels of acquirement of the knowledge. We are looking into the thinking order experienced by the students in order to complete the task. In your instructions, you can simply put the word justify what, asking the students to justify something. But what is actually being asked from the students are literally found in the reference or the textbooks. What they have to do during the process of answering your questions, it will be merely recall and discuss. Now, even though the term here stated is justified, but the thinking orders done by the students actually bypass the level 5 here. And what is actually experienced by the students, it is just discussing something which they learn from the textbook or the references. Now, if this happens, the questions set in your tests and examinations should theoretically be level 2 instead of level 5. This is what it means by never treat this as keywords for you to manipulate the levels of cognitive domains. Now, answering the questions mentioned just now, when you see the discuss sometimes appear in C2, discuss also appear in C3, and discuss sometimes also appear in C4, which you search through the internet. It is not that the information given by the relevant website is wrong. It is mainly due to you look into it as a keyword. If you are asked to discuss something, and during the process there are elements of analyzing certain things, and that particular discussions is custom-made to a specific case where there are elements of comparing, contrasting, which involve in-depth understanding of one particular case which is unique to the other, then that particular discussions can be considered as level 4, as there are elements of analysis. Now, does it mean that I agree to use the word discuss here? Personally, I do not suggest so, because you have a more specific, more suitable terminology used under these circumstances. This is to prevent confusions. If you want the students to analyze, straight away you just state analyze something in your instructions. If you want the students to compare something and discriminate something, you may straight away use the term compare and discriminate. Now, the common problems of the lecturers when defining the levels of cognitive domain, there are always confusions between C4 and C2. When you set the questions, sometimes you also ask the students to compare and to contrast something. Now, if you ask the students to work out the differences between the two items where the relevant information is acquired, it is by the means of understanding and analyzing a specific situations, and the solutions is not literally come out from any textbook and references, then this will be considered as level 4 analysis. Now, if the questions is asking the students to compare or contrast something, and the solutions are coming from the references and textbook, now you will expect that students will just need to recall and describe what they learned from the textbook without even going through into in-depth analysis and diagnosing certain things. And then this will be considered as C2. This brings to my next point, where I purposely highlight the word compare here in red. It is not every time you encounter the term compare here, it will be automatically under C4. You will have to simulate and imagine the thinking order that the students have to go through, that they cannot simply bypass it in order to determine the levels of difficulties. Very often, the compare, contrast, differentiates, discriminates, and even outline may end up to be level 2 if it is not properly designed. If the comparisons is generic, which is on basis of the information given in the notes, textbooks or references, you know that they will be considered under C2. Now, the fundamental concept of using the taxonomy, it is not playing around with the keywords. We are talking about the levels of thinking order that the students must have gone through in order to complete their tasks as instructed by you. The second point here, when you choose the terms as your instructions, you will have to find the most suitable term, most closely resemble the nature of your instructions, instead of choosing any terminology while giving your instructions. I will strongly encourage you to follow the terminologies here and try not to mess up the terminology under different levels of cognitive domain. This will lead to the confusions among the lecturers and also among the students. Now, knowing that we have to use the suitable term in our instructions,